जी सामने करम 4:37 हमारी घड़ी में हो चुके हैं और फजी भी हमारे साथ हैं और डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर भी हमारे साथ हैं. व्हाट अ ग्रेट जेंटलमैन. आई जस्ट स्पोक टू हिम फॉर maybe 30 seconds and I found out, wow, what a gentleman.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dr. Eben Alexander is not an ordinary man. आपने हार्वर्ड से पढ़ा हुआ है और न्यूरोसर्जन आप कहे हैं. मैं बल्कि इनके बारे में थोड़ा सा आपको बताना चाहती हूँ कि एबन अलेक्जेंडर जो है न्यूरोसर्जन है. तकरीबन 54 इयर्स से साइंटिफिक वर्ल्ड व्यूज के साथ हैं. मैं इनके बारे में बल्कि अभी देख रही थी कि इनके जितने कलीग्स हैं सारे वेल एजुकेटेड वेल लर्नड डॉक्टर्स हैं, न्यूरो सर्जन्स हैं. और आपको पता ही है न्यूरो सर्जन कि हमारा दिमाग कैसे काम करता है, दिमाग की कारकर्दगी क्या है. कभी भी ये लोग जो साइंस के ऊपर बिलीव करते हैं ये स्पिरिचुअल चीज़ों के ऊपर उस तरह बिलीव नहीं करते, क्योंकि कोई भी शख्स जो साइंस से बहुत ज़्यादा इन्वॉल्व हो जाता है वो 2+2=4 ही की बात करता है. मगर वो कहते हैं ना कि बाज़ औक़ात कुदरत हमको कुछ दिखा देती है और जिसके बाद हमारे नज़रियात बदल जाते हैं. मैं थोड़ा सा एक दफ़ा फिर से तारुफ कराना चाहती हूँ. डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर जो है न्यूरोसर्जन हैं. तकरीबन 55 साल इन्होंने साइंटिफिक वर्ल्ड व्यूज में इन्होंने अपनी ज़िंदगी गुजारी है और उनके ज़ाहिर है साइंस के बारे में जानने के तौर पे दिमाग की सर्जरीज करने के बाद, दिमाग के बारे में जानने के बाद इनको बिल्कुल यही इनका भी एक आम साइंटिस्ट की तरह, एक आम न्यूरोसर्जन की तरह यही ख्याल था कि दिमाग के कोने कोने से बेहतरीन वाकफियत है कि किस तरह से हमारा दिमाग काम करता है, किस तरह से कोऑर्डिनेशन ऑफ आवर बॉडी चलती है. मगर जैसे कहते हैं ना कि बाज़ औक़ात हेल्यूसिनेशंस पे बिलीव ना करना, कि बाज़ औक़ात कोई इंसान अपना ख्याल या अपना तख़य्युल बयान करता है कि वो लोग जो साइंस के साथ ताल्लुक़ रखते हैं वो कहते हैं ये दिमाग की इजरा है या ये मेंटल इश्यूज के साथ उन चीज़ों को इन्वॉल्व कर दिया करते हैं. मगर डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर ही खुद ही अपने आप को साथ शेयर करेंगे. फिर ही वेंट टू जो नियर डेथ एक्सपीरियंस, यानी बाज़ औक़ात लोग कॉमे में चले जाते हैं. कॉमे में जाने के बाद इंसान को बाज़ औक़ात जब अगर वो वापस आ जाता है तो उसको बिल्कुल भी याद नहीं रहता कि उन 5, 6, 7, 8 एक महीने के बीच में क्या उस पर बीती या क्या उस पर गुजरी. मगर इन्होंने जो ये इस रियलिटी को जब इन्होंने फाइंड किया तो बड़ी स्ट्रेंज. मैं यहाँ पे आपको ये भी बताना चाहती हूँ कि डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर जब बीमार होते हैं और जब इस सिचुएशन में से गुजरते हैं तो इनको एक ऐसी बीमारी हो गई थी जिसमें नॉर्मली तो ये कि दिमाग का वो जैसे मैंने पहले कहा हाईली ट्रेन न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट हैं और हजारों ब्रेन्स की सर्जरी कर चुके हैं अपने करियर के दौरान. और यानी सोल के बारे में जो इल्म है वो बिलीव इनका नहीं था. फिर वो कहते हैं कि डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर जो हैं, जो कि खुद दिमाग के ऊपर काम करते हैं, इनके अपने दिमाग में एक तकलीफ होती है और दिमाग का वो हिस्सा, हमारे ब्रेन के बीच में डिफरेंट पोर्शंस हैं. देखने का पोर्शन अलग है, सोचने का पोर्शन अलग है, जो हम रिएक्ट करते हैं मुख्तलिफ चीज़ों को उसका पोर्शन अलग है. इनके दिमाग का वो हिस्सा इस बीमारी का शिकार हुआ जो कि हमको हकीकत में इंसान बनाता है और ये दिमाग का पोर्शन मुकम्मल तौर पर इनका शट डाउन हो गया. 7 दिन के लिए डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर हॉस्पिटल में डीप कोमा की हालत में रहे. और पहली बात तो ये कि इस सूरत में वापस आ जाना ही बहुत बड़ा मौजज़ा था. यानी आम तौर पे ख्याल किया जाता है कि इस दिमाग के हिस्से के ऊपर अगर अटैक हो जाए तो वो शख्स दोबारा जिंदगी में वापस नहीं आ सकता. मगर न्यूरोसाइंसिस और न्यूरोलॉजी पे काम करते हुए वो कहते हैं कि ये जो अद्वियात की तारीख है उसके बीच में एक बहुत बड़ा मौजज़ा था. मगर सबसे उससे बड़ा मौजज़ा ये था कि इस दौरान जो कुछ भी हुआ डॉक्टर साहब को याद रहा. I definitely thank Dr. Eben Alexander. I thank you very much, Dr. Eben Alexander. You gave me time to interview you, and I think this is your first time that you are talking to South Asians.
Yes, I believe it is the first time to South Asia, and I'm so glad you've invited me to be here.
Thank you very kindly, Doctor. Thank you, and I thank Elizabeth as well, who made me a way to reach you. I thank her, and I thank you very much. Dr. Eben Alexander, you were a student of Harvard University. Is that true?
Okay, well, I had grown up the son of a neurosurgeon. My father was very religious. I spent time Duke Medical School, then Harvard Medical School, and spent 20 years in active practice teaching at Harvard Medical School, believing I had some idea of how brain, mind, and consciousness work. And then in November 2008, I suddenly came down with a very severe case of gram-negative bacterial meningitis, the worst kind of bacterial meningitis you can have, that drove me into a coma within just a few hours and left me in coma for a week. And that was really the setting for my education to learn that, in fact, my prior understanding of brain, mind, and consciousness was completely wrong. And, in fact, all of our scientific world is coming to this same realization that the physical world is only a tiny part of what really exists, and that, in fact, in so many ways, the great religious systems of both East and West have really had it right in many ways over these years, and this is all around the question of consciousness. And what my illness showed me very clearly is the physical brain does not create consciousness, but in fact, consciousness is a far deeper mystery, and that's what this is all about, and it will lead to a synthesis of science and spirituality and really a coalescence of all of our religious beliefs and scientific understandings.
You, as a Howard graduate, you spent so many years studying, and then you are a very successful surgeon. It's kind of strange. It's kind of strange listening from you that, you know what, all the theories that you've read before, they're kind of wrong.
Well, this is really, as I said, it was shown to me in a very powerful fashion, because my journey clearly points out that the brain does not create consciousness, and that we are spiritual beings, and this is a spiritual universe. To think that it is just material is a great illusion of our conventional kind of Western scientific thinking, because it's steeped in pure materialism, that only the physical world exists. And yet that is false. In fact, the only thing any one of us truly knows to exist is our own consciousness. And in fact, when you come to realize that my journey and many similar journeys show us that we're all part of that one consciousness, and that in fact we are these eternal spiritual beings, and that in that realm of our home of the spirit, the most important thing is love, compassion, mercy. And this is a crucial understanding for our world to come to, and especially our scientific thinking, which kind of leads the way in our understanding of the world, must shift from that pure faith in the material being all that exists to realizing that it really works the other way around, that this is a spiritual universe with an infinitely loving God at the core, and we are all part of that. And this is part of the understanding around consciousness and the relationship of brain and mind that mankind has struggled to understand for more than 2,400 years.
Dr. Alexander, could you talking about your experience, what you make you realize all this, what you're talking about right now, could you share your experience, what made you realize this for the benefit of our listeners?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'll put out that given everything that I believed based on my scientific training about brain creates consciousness before my coma, none of what I experienced could possibly have happened. And that is why I've had to take this very seriously. This is why I'm often asked to speak to medical and surgical groups around the world, is the fact that my disease, the gram-negative meningitis, is a perfect model for human death. And that's because of the amount of destruction that it gives to the neocortex, the outer surface of the brain, the human part of the brain. So in fact, my illness should have disabled any possible hallucination, dream effect, drug effect, what have you, and yet it didn't. In fact, the destruction of my brain in the meningitis actually enabled a far greater awareness, which, of course, near-death experiencers have been telling us for thousands of years. It turns out that my memories, when I came back to this world, what I remembered from deep in coma, started in what I call the earthworm eye view, a very primitive, coarse, unresponsive kind of subterranean realm that was murky and sounds very foreboding, but I was also amnesic for all of my life before. That's an atypical feature of my journey is that I remembered nothing of Eben Alexander's life. In fact, I had no words or language throughout this entire journey. I had no memories of life on Earth or of humanity. So it started in that Earthworm Eye View realm, but I was quickly rescued from that by a slowly spinning white light, a clear white light that came to me with a perfect musical melody, and it opened up like a portal up into this rich, vibrant, ultra-real, alive, a very vivid, crisp world, the Gateway Valley, that had many earthly features. It had I was moving up through it because I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing with millions of other butterflies. There were sparkling waterfalls and the crystal blue pools. There were thousands of souls dancing in this meadow down below me, souls between lives with lots of joy and merriment, and all that was being fueled because up above were these swooping orbs, golden orbs, leaving sparkling golden trails and emanating chants and anthems, hymns. And when I wrote it all up weeks later, I referred to those swooping golden orbs as angelic choirs. And on this butterfly wing with me was a beautiful woman who, many months after my coma, would come to be the key to proving the reality of the entire journey to me. But when I first saw her on this butterfly wing, her message to me, which is really the central message of Proof of Heaven and of my whole journey, because it's a message for all souls in this world: you will be taken care of. You have nothing to fear. You are deeply loved and cherished. And I was given this beautiful demonstration of the infinite healing power of unconditional love, and then witnessed this beautiful breeze that blew through like a soft summer breeze that was, in fact, given my complete amnesia for all of life before and all of my religious beliefs and everything else. That breeze was a divine wind. It was the breath of God. It was the awakening to the reality of an infinitely loving God at the core of all creation. And from then, I would ascend up through those musical portals of the swooping orbs of angels above into higher and higher levels, seeing all of space and time collapsing down until I got out to what I call the core, infinite, inky blackness, but filled to overflowing with infinite love of that divine creator, of that deity. And given many lessons in that realm about the nature of sentience throughout this universe and how we are all here to manifest love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy for ourselves and for all fellow beings. And in this journey, I would then tumble back down to that earthworm eye view, but by remembering the musical notes of the melody, I could conjure up that beautiful spinning white light that once again served as a portal, took me back up into that Gateway Valley with a beautiful girl, always reassuring me you were deeply loved and cherished forever. You will be taken care of. You have nothing to fear. Then on out again through the angelic choirs, all the way to that pure oneness of the core. And when I came back from it all, that God, that deity that I encountered in that core realm was so infinitely loving and powerful that, in fact, the word God did not do justice to that being, to the power and astonishing nature of that all-loving deity. And so what I often tell people is whether you refer to that deity as God or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, I don't care what words you use. The reality of that God is absolute, and the stunning power of the infinite capacity for healing for the individual, for soul groups, for ethnic and national groups, all of humanity, all of life on earth, that healing can occur through manifesting that unconditional love of the Creator for the creation. And this was the deepest lesson of my journey, and it's the reason that I want to share this. It's really a message of unification. It's one that has to do with the very nature of consciousness, of the fundamental nature of reality, and how this whole world is shifting to a much higher view that does involve the absolute concrete reality of that deity, of that God, that is a God of pure love and mercy and compassion.
Samay Karam, we are speaking to Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon and writer of a book, Proof of Heaven. And what a wonderful experience that you had gone through that. One quick question, then I'll let Arifa ask the question. One quick question that rises me, and while I'm talking to you, sometimes I get goosebumps. Okay, so I think, Dr. Saab, that is a little natural thing that's going through with me. But did you get to see or meet any angels or God?
Yes, in fact, it turns out that the beautiful girl on the butterfly wing, I've come to see very much as a guardian angel. And of course, those who have read the book, Proof of Heaven, will realize that beautiful girl was very mysterious when I first came back, because I remember her perfectly. I know exactly, what she looked like, how she was sitting, how she was dressed. In fact, the very deepest aspects of her mind, that assurance of love and compassion, forgiveness, that I would be taken care of and had nothing to fear. I knew so deeply, and yet I also knew I had never met that woman in my life. A parallel mystery to me was the fact that if I had scripted my near-death experience, I would have encountered my father. He had died 4 years before my coma, and first and foremost, he would have been there if I had scripted this, and yet he was nowhere to be found. And so those very deep mysteries to me, the absence of my father and the presence of this beautiful guardian angel who I remember perfectly, and yet also know that I had never met in my life, haunted me for months after my coma. And of course, that's what the book Proof of Heaven is all about, is the revelation about that beautiful guardian angel. Now, that deity, that God, absolutely. That was the most stunning aspect of this entire journey. But the key to understand, as I often tell people, is you don't have to wait till you die or almost die through a near-death experience to fully know that God just as I do. We can all know that God deep in our very consciousness through deep centering prayer, through deep meditation. And for me, when I talk about meditation, and especially the kind of tools that I have helped to bring to the world through a group called Sacred Acoustics, to use differential sound frequencies to help get into deep transcendental states. For me, those are used as a form of centering prayer to get in touch very directly with that God, with that all-loving deity, that pure love, the creative source of this universe. And I do that in daily meditations even now. This is how I've returned back to those realms, even though I've never been able, through meditation, to duplicate the full-blown ultra-reality that I witnessed in that journey. But it could just be that won't happen until my brain is similarly devastated again, by any kind of illness or disease. But the interesting thing is, as you destroy the brain, you actually greatly enhance our awareness to a much higher level. And that's what my journey showed me very clearly. In a very concrete form, the brain does not create consciousness at all. So it's a complete and absolute refutation of our scientific materialism that tries to pretend that the physical world is the only thing that exists and that the physical brain creates consciousness out of physical matter. That part is absolutely false. And that's where the scientific world is now growing tremendously in its study of consciousness itself, trying to understand the nature of reality and to determine that, in fact, we are truly spiritual beings and this is a spiritual universe.
डॉक्टर साहब की बुक्स जो है प्रूफ ऑफ हेवन डिलक्स एडिशन है, द मैप ऑफ हेवन है. मेरी रिक्वेस्ट है कि इसको पढ़ने की कोशिश कीजिएगा. डॉक्टर एलेक्जेंडर, सो वंस यू वेंट इनटू दिस कॉमा, what was your first experience? I was watching your show with Oprah Winfrey, and it is a terrifying experience. What was the first experience?
Well, the first experience I refer to as the earthworm's eye view, and it was a very primitive, coarse, and unresponsive realm. And, of course, to many people, when I would tell that part of the story early on, they would think, that sounds horrible, that sounds, very frightening. But, in fact, given that I had no memory of my life before coma, I mean, really everything of my human memories were deleted. So, in fact, it was not as frightening as it sounds, and that allowed me to be fearless through this entire journey. In fact, throughout the entire near-death experience, I thought, well, this can all continue, or everything can cease. It does not matter. That was part of my amnesia, not remembering my human existence before. And yet, at the end of it all, of course, what did bring me back was seeing six faces of people, people who were actually in the ICU room the last 24 hours I was in coma, and one of those faces was my 10-year-old son, Bond. And even though when I witnessed him, I did not know who he was, I did sense an extremely powerful connection between us as souls, and I came back because of my love for him, even though I had no memory of why he was such an important soul to me.
So this means you said that you saw many souls beneath and upward, every was floating. Did you see any other relative? You said you could not see your father there, but could you see any of your relative, or can you recognize, or can you remember?
Well, yes. Most importantly, was the beautiful girl on the butterfly wing. And again, this is why the story is so important, because there's no way I could have possibly known how to recognize that soul from everything I knew going into the coma. And that's why it's such a shocking story. And it turns out it has a lot to do with the rest of my personal story, which, of course, is told in the book Proof of Heaven, has to do with the fact that I was adopted. That my birth mother was a sophomore in high school, my birth father a senior, and they had to give me up for adoption when I was a young child. And I spent more than 54 years of my life not knowing who they were. And then parents had gotten married, which was a big shock to me. I never expected that at all. And they had 3 children. But in fact, their youngest daughter had died 2 years before I found out about her in the year 2000. And that is really kind of the key to the story, and that's why I encourage people to read the book Proof of Heaven to see the rest of it. But it's an absolutely heart-rending, mind-bending journey of discovery and the reality of that beautiful girl on the butterfly wing relating to souls that were deeply related to me, but I didn't know about them because of my adoption history. And that's why it is such a fascinating and kind of shocking story that gets people's attention.
Dr. Eben Alexander, 25 plus years as a neurosurgeon or RHP neuro. So even today you are doing surgeries on the different brains nowadays as well?
Well, neurosurgery is a very full-time job. In my training, I worked about 120 hours a week, and then in my practice, I was working between 60 and 80 hours a week. You cannot do that part-time. And after my coma journey, I was blessed to go back to work. In fact, my doctors to this day would tell you they have no explanation for how I had such a full recovery, because in fact, when I first got to the emergency room, I had about a 10% chance of survival. I was already deep in coma. By the end of the week in coma, I was down to a 2% chance of survival with no chance of recovery. And it was after that I started coming back to this world. But when I did, my brain was absolutely wrecked. Wow. I did not even recognize my mother, my sisters, my sons standing around the bedside. So those memories of my personal life came back over weeks. Memories of all my knowledge of brain, mind, science, and consciousness came back over about 8 weeks. That recovery, as I said, is an absolute miracle that has no explanation in Western medicine. But the real mystery was why in the world did I have any kind of rich, elaborate, extensive experience like the Odyssey that I witnessed deep in coma, and that the memories of that experience are as sharp today as if the whole thing happened yesterday. These memories are not hallucinations. They are not dreams. It's not some drug effect. They're very profound memories that are created through the reality of our spiritual existence in a realm that's much more real than this one. That's the thing that's so shocking. And, of course, I'd never read the near-death experience literature before my coma. And after my coma, my son, who was majoring in neuroscience, urged me to write down everything I could remember about my coma journey before I read anything about near-death experiences. So I took his advice and I wrote 20,000 words, everything I could remember, and then got deeply into reading thousands of near-death experience accounts. And the thing that shocked me was the similarities. And more than half of those near-death experiences talk about how that world that they visit seems much more real than this world. And it does. This world is the dreamlike world. That world is much more sharp, crisp, and real. That's our true home. And that's what, as I said, near-death experiencers, which would include prophets and mystics and seers and seekers over thousands of years from every single culture and every single belief system, have had similar journeys. And that's where the near-death experience community, which has enlarged greatly over the last 5 decades because of cardiac resuscitation of patients after cardiac arrest, has now populated this world with millions of souls who have been to the other side. That is not an accident. That is really the universe's way and God's way of trying to wake us up to realize that we must overcome the petty differences of our dogmatic religious beliefs that take us into such separation, and must realize that we are truly here to show love, compassion, and mercy for ourselves and for all fellow beings. And it is time to move beyond our petty dogmatic differences that are not real in the eyes of that infinitely loving, compassionate, and merciful God at the core of all of reality.
God is merciful, no doubt about it. But Dr. Eben, as a Muslim, I think by giving good care to your patients, you must have prayers of many thousands of people with you. There might be some people who have hurt people on this earth. They must disappear in that horrible world which you saw in the beginning.
Well, I believe that God is so loving that God would never condemn a soul to eternal hell and damnation. This is all about learning. We are here to learn and teach. That God is infinitely merciful and loving and compassionate. And we are the ones that are here to learn these lessons. And the more we can lead a life that shows compassion and mercy, forgiveness, and acceptance of others, loving ourselves, loving our neighbors, loving our, quote, enemy, unquote. This is all about the message that God really wants us to hear. And from my point of view, that has been the message. It's come through all the prophets, whether you look at Buddha, Muhammad, Christ, Swedenborg. There are many different journeyers who have tried to bring back messages to us that talk of this, but it really is of oneness, and this has to do with the scientific understanding of consciousness itself. And this is where I think the world of science and spirituality must come together, and in fact will. And also, it's time for us to rise above the petty dogmatic differences in our lives. But it really is about a universe and a God that is very much just, and this is about justice. So we reap what we sow, and if we can bring love, compassion, acceptance, forgiveness into our own lives for ourselves and for all of those around us, that is our best way of becoming one with that deity, with that God. And there's no other pathway. The pathway of conflict, of aggression, the pathway of not loving each other, of showing selfishness and greed, of hoarding resources, that kind of thing is not in that all-loving God's best interest. And so I believe this really is about that God loving the creation. And so anything that we do that does not love part of that creation is not in favor of that God. And we are the ones who end up doing the judgment when it comes to the life review and a near-death experience. But it is all having to do with understanding that we're here to learn and teach, and that the fundamental lessons of this universe, of our true spiritual universe that we are all part of, are those lessons of love and acceptance and compassion and forgiveness.
Dr. Eben Alexander, Proof of Heaven is one book, Proof of Heaven Deluxe Edition, Map of Heaven. Or Dr. Eben, what was your method of communication over there?
It's pure knowing. I mean, there is part of the illusion here that we must rise above is this kind of sense of self, the boundaries of self. We really are in this together. There's much more of a commonality and a kind of a joining together of mind, of consciousness, of soul and spirit that we're all part of. And it's not just a part of humanity. This involves all of life, and not just all life on Earth. There, in fact, are many far advanced civilizations throughout this universe. We're all part of that sentience. We're all part of that knowing. And so this is really about learning those particular lessons and rising above that, seeing that one consciousness and mind and spirit and soul is something we are all part of, and the boundaries of self are what are somewhat misleading about all this. And I think that is something that we need to come to see and know.
Dr. Eben Alexander, I thank you very much for giving us time. I think one of the best message, and I believe our listeners will definitely find some message in it: love, compassion, and forgiveness. I believe as human beings, we are forgetting all these three factors: love, compassion, and forgiveness. I thank you very much. And now I recommend and I request everybody Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven. Get these books, read these books. The reason I got so much into you is I am always looking away to meet my husband. So I wish when I will go there, I'll recognize him and he will recognize me. I'm sure.
Well, I'm sure he will and you will. And one can do this through deep meditation. Deep meditation and prayer is a way to come to know all this long before we die and leave this world.
Would you please shed some light on deep meditation? How you recommend people to do this deep meditation?
What I recommend is people, in my book, The Map of Heaven, in the appendix, I talk about it. The appendix is entitled The Answers Lie Within Us All. And for those who are interested in how I go into deep meditation, I recommend you visit the website sacredacoustics.com, and they have a free download of a 20-minute meditation using differential frequency sounds, which can help people get into very deep transcendental conscious states. And so that's the kind of tool that people can use. And so you can get all the clues you need, and the important thing about that kind of sound is it's best to listen to it through headphones so that each ear is getting its own sound signal, and that's what gives such tremendous power to it. And it helps to set the soul free. It helps to free up our conscious awareness outside of the illusion of the apparent here and now that is all part of the veil of our brain and how it filters down consciousness. The consciousness is actually part of that divine, infinitely creative source. And that's what we can come to know. So people who want to learn more should go to sacredacoustics.com, download the free meditation, and listen through headphones, and follow some of the other directions that are there on the Sacred Acoustics website.
With your due permission, we will definitely put your interview on our website. We'll definitely put that website on our link, that website to our website so that people can take an advantage of. I thank you very kindly. And any message for our listeners?
Well, the main message is each and every one of you souls are deeply loved and cherished forever. We are all part of one great soul that is a divine, infinitely loving God. And it is up to us to come to that discovery of the oneness and the love and the bliss that we are here to share as sentient beings. And the awakening that is coming to this world will be a true gift for each and every soul that is here. And God bless you all. People who want to know more and keep in touch with me should go to ebenalexander.com.
ebenalexander.com पे आप जाके खुद देखिएगा. And I request everybody, इनकी books हैं, Proof of Heaven, Map of Heaven, कोशिश करें इन books को देखें, पढ़ें. जस्तजू की बात है. डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर, इनके वालिद साहब डॉक्टर थे, ये खुद डॉक्टर हैं, इनके बेटे मेडिसिन से हैं, हार्वर्ड स्कूल ऑफ मेडिसिन में पढ़ा, हार्वर्ड स्कूल ऑफ मेडिसिन में पढ़ाया. पैगाम अब देते हैं लव, कंपैशन और फॉरगिवनेस का. near death experience हमने आपके साथ share किया. Dr. Eben Alexander, I thank you again, and I wish I can get your time again in whenever you have convenience.
We will for sure, and God bless you and all of your listeners.
God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Proof of the Heaven Deluxe Edition भी हेवन है. डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर से मैंने आपकी बात करवाई. I was very keen and I was very curious कि मैं ये इंटरव्यू आपके साथ शेयर करूं. हजारों लोगों का ये नियर डेथ एक्सपीरियंस आप लोगों ने भी शेयर किया है. डॉक्टर एबन अलेक्जेंडर is not an ordinary man. He's a highly trained neurosurgeon जिन्होंने thousands of brains के ऊपर ऑपरेशन किया अपने करियर के बीच में. And it's वो कहते हैं ना कि ये एक मेडिकल था, मेडिकल मेरिकल था कि जिस बीमारी यानी बैक्टीरियल मेनिंजाइटिस जो थी उससे ये रिकवर भी किए और दोबारा अपनी पूरी मेमोरी के साथ वापस आए. आज भी प्रैक्टिसिंग न्यूरोसर्जन है. जैसे उन्होंने आपको बताया कि ये फुल टाइम इनकी जॉब है और यकीनन बहुत से लोगों की दुआएं इनके साथ होंगी. फर्स्ट एक्सपीरियंस इनका बहुत डरा देने वाला एक्सपीरियंस. मुझे तो वो यूं समझिए दलदली इलाका जहाँ गड़गड़ गड़गड़ की आवाज आ रही है, अर्थ फॉर्म्स हैं. फर्स्ट एक्सपीरियंस वो था, मगर फौरी तौर पर एक वो कहते हैं कि वो जो सोल इनको मिलती है, ये जो एंजल मिलता है, वो कहता है यू डोंट हैव टू वरी, यू विल बी टेकन केयर. और वो फिर उसके बाद इनको लेकर के चलता है. 7 days का इनका एक्सपीरियंस है. अगेन ये इस वक्त जितने न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट हैं उनको बता भी रहे हैं, पढ़ा. इज नॉट यानी कोई कहानी बनाने वाला इंसान नहीं है. वेरी वेल एजुकेटेड. आगे इनका बेटा जो है वो भी मेडिकल साइंसेस से ही वाबस्ता है. ये अगेन डॉक्टर अलेक्जेंडर जो रिकवर हुए, इट इज ऑल मेडिकल मेरिकल इसको कंसिडर किया जाता है. और उनको अपनी कहानी का वो कहते हैं बिल्कुल इसी तरह से याद है. जी माजिद भाई, आपने क्या महसूस किया?
Afaji, sounds very cheesy right now, मगर I've gone through the same experience, मगर मैंने अपना experience है किससे शेयर नहीं किया कभी और ना ही मैं शेयर करना चाहता हूँ. मगर ये कि whatever डॉक्टर
माजिद भाई, जब आपको हार्ट अटैक हुआ था, you were gone for almost 20 minutes.
Bit more than that.
अच्छा.
हाँ, bit more than that. And वो जो एक्सपीरियंस था वो यस, दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग दैट आई कैन रिलेट टू. और मैंने डॉक्टर साहब से यही कहा था कि व्हेन यू आर टॉकिंग टू मी एंड व्हेन आई एम टॉकिंग टू यू एंड व्हेन आई एम लिसनिंग टू यू, आई एम गेटिंग गूज बम्प्स. द गूज बम्प्स मीन्स कि आई वाज गोइंग बैक देयर है ना. और वो मैं फील कर रहा था कि जो डॉक्टर साहब इज गॉन थ्रू, आई पर्सनली हैव गॉन थ्रू दैट. आई कैन रिलेट टू दैट.
साहब ये इनकी फेसबुक www.drabenalexander.com के ऊपर अगर आप आएँ तो यू कैन सी ऑल दीज. उनकी बुक्स भी, उनके बारे में उनकी स्टोरीज, बहुत से लोगों की ये कहानियां हैं. वही बात है. मगर मैं माजिद भाई ये समझती हूँ, उन्होंने तो ये कहा है कि खुदा जो है वो माफ़ करने वाला है और सबसे प्यार करने वाला है. कि वो जो फर्स्ट एक्सपीरियंस है ना, जो लोग इतना जुल्म करते हैं दुनिया के बीच में, तो यकीनन कहीं ना कहीं कोई तो कोई फेस करना है. तो वो एक्सपीरियंस कहीं लंबा ना हो जाए. बहरहाल अल्लाह ताला मुझे
इसीलिए आरफा जी, आपने मुझे 50 दफ़ा कहते हुए सुना होगा कि हुकूकुल अल्लाह, क्योंकि वो इतना मेहरबान, इतना रहीम है. मोस्ट प्रॉब्ली ही इज़ गोना फॉरगिव हुकूकुल अल्लाह. मगर हुकूकुल इबाद को आप नहीं कर सकते. जो दलदल वगैरह की जो बात है ना, ये हुकूकुल इबाद की है.
मगर ये उन लोगों का क्या किया जाए वो जो ये कहते हैं कि अब देखिए इस शख्स ने भी, और मैंने क्योंकि मेरा रोज का और मैं कुछ देखूं ना देखूं, मैं इस तरह की चीजों को जरूर देखती हूँ. क्योंकि वो कहते हैं ना हर इंसान की एक जुस्तजू होती है, मेरी भी एक जुस्तजू जरूर है. तो बहुत से लोग दुनिया में बस माफ करने के कायल ही नहीं हैं, और वो नमाज भी पढ़ते हैं, कुरान भी पढ़ते हैं. वो ये समझते हैं जन्नत गारंटीड है, और हर इंसान कहता है जन्नत सिर्फ मेरी कौम के लिए गारंटीड है. बाकी मगर
मैं आपको एक बात बताऊं, मैं आपको जो आपने जो अभी माफी वगैरह की बात की है ना, तो मैं आपको एक बात बताऊं. गफरा से निकला है ये वर्ड, जो मगफिरत की बात कर रही है ना, आपके किसी ने किसी को माफ़ किया, तो ये वर्ड गफरा से निकला है. और गफरा का मतलब किसी के ऐब को छुपाना. तो अल्लाह सुब्हानहू तआला से हम जब मगफिरत मांगते हैं तो हम ये कहते हैं कि हमारे ऐबों को छुपाना और हमारे गुनाहों को माफ़ करना. तो जब हम अल्लाह से मांग रहे हो, अगर कोई शख्स के दिल में ऐसे हो कि मैं इसको माफ़ नहीं करूँगा या माफ़ नहीं करूँगी, तो پھر آپ اللہ کے سامنے جا کے کیسے اپنی مغفرت مانگ سکتے ہیں؟
کیا بات ہے، جب آپ خود ہی معاف نہیں کریں گے تو
اگر آپ خود نہیں معاف کر سکتے تو اللہ سبحانہ وتعالیٰ یہ کہتے ہیں کہ تم نے اس کو معاف کیا نہیں تو میں تمہیں کیسے معاف کر سکتا ہوں؟
بہرحال جب تک ہم زندگی کے بیچ میں ہیں، زندگی کے معاملات بھی چلتے رہیں گے. بہت خوبصورت انٹرویو، اس کو میں اپنے کوشش کریں گے ہم فیس بک کے اوپر بھی پوسٹ کریں اور اس کو ویب سائٹ کے اوپر بھی پوسٹ کریں. یقیناً ثروت اور وحیدہ لک آفٹر کریں گی اس کو.